So, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for choosing to come to the radiation emergency session. There's two other interesting parallel sessions, plus I think an IEA ICRP joint meeting at the moment. So I'm pleased to see this number of people here, basically. So we should finish by 5:30. It would be great if we finished slightly earlier, since we've got the gala dinner later, just to give people at least half an hour to get some fresh air, shower, whatever anybody wants to do. So we will try to keep to time. So thank you for that. So in addition to finding out more about the related video and poster presentations, we will have 4 presentations today on a diverse range of topics that are emergency related, spanning medical systems, stockpiles, radiation protection advice, and communications. I think we will leave the questions to the end unless there's a burning point of clarification after each presentation. Then please feel free to ask that question. But more general discussion we will take at the end of the session. And we should have about 30 minutes for discussion at the end. So I'm Anne Nisbet, and if you weren't around in the plenary session last thing yesterday, I was introduced then, but just a short synopsis. I'm Radiation Recovery Lead at UK Health Security Agency. I have responsibilities for public protection advice in radiation emergencies. I'm also lead on the UK Recovery Handbook for radiation incidents. So we started that back in 2000, and we're now on version 5, about to come out early 2024. I've been a member of ICRP Committee 4 since 2013. I currently head up a task group on radiation emergencies and malicious events. And I've spent some time working with IEA on site at Fukushima, or at least within the prefecture of Fukushima. So now I would like to hand over to my co-chair for this session, Satoshi Tashiro.
Thank you, Anne. I'm Satoshi Tashiro from Hiroshima University Research Institute for Radiation Biology and Medicine. And I'm also the president of Japan Radiation Research Society at present. And since I am also a pediatrician, I am now doing normally radiation biology, but I'm originally a pediatrician. I had an experience to come to Fukushima just after the accident to measure thyroid dose there. So I'm very happy to co-chair this session with Anna here today. Thank you. So first, I think it's our rapporteur, Kotaro Tani from QST Japan, will introduce the video and poster presentations. Kotaro, please.
Yep. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Kotaro Tani and QST Japan. I am honored to be here today, and so for me, I will talk about the introduction of related video and poster presentations. So first, this is overview, and this time the total number of video and poster presentations relating to radiation emergencies is 27. And these charts show the number of presentations relating to radiation emergency by region and country, and 22 presentations out of 27, which is more than 80%, are from Asia. The others are from North America and Europe. By country, 9 presentations are from South Korea, followed by 7 from Japan, 2 each from China, United States, and Vietnam. We have a lot of keywords, and this table shows the number of abstracts by keywords, and we can see the first two keywords, and internal exposure is the keyword included in 15 presentations out of 27, whereas external exposure is 2. And next group, both physical dosimetry and biological dosimetry seems to be great interest. A wide range of area represented by the various keywords of simulation, the cooperation agent, environmental measurement, training, and radiation protection of the public are addressed in multiple presentations. The main radionuclides targeted in research relating to radiation emergencies are iodine, cesium, and actinides. So I would like to introduce the two presentations, each on those reconstruction by simulation and thyroid exposure to radioiodine and biological dosimetry for each. So first, two presentations related to those reconstruction by simulation. The first presentation is the ID is 2113, and this presentation is on the reproduction of the real condition by Minoru Sakama. This presentation introduced the useful tools and software like FITS, and this is the radiation transport simulation code, and also mesh type reference computational phantoms published by the ICRP publication 145, and also other softwares, Blender, Fusion 360, MSC Apex Modeler, and X Spectrum. These are used for the transformation of the phantom and 3D CAD software, and also mesh modeling and X-ray spectrum calculation. So this poster shows the method to import the complex topology into FITS. And another poster developed the Maxi software presented by Han-Yoon Kim. And this is the GUI-based Monte Carlo simulation software for external exposure. Multiple MRCPs and Jant for Monte Carlo toolkit can be used. And also, we can determine any sources such as the forward disk, volume, and beam, broad beam. So this software is promising program for emergency external exposure adopted by the ICRP task group 112. Another two posters on the thyroid exposure to radioiodine, and the first one is the about alpha cyclodextrin for radioiodine ingestion by Masahiro Hirota, and this presentation showed that the results of the mouse experiments using iodine 123 with and without administration of alpha CD. And this agent can be used for the inhibition of the radioiodine absorption from the small intestine. So finally, they show that the 40% reduction of the 24-hour thyroid uptake and thyroid exposure. And this would be the possible application as a food additive to ensure peace of mind for the food and drink from the affected area after the nuclear or radiation emergencies. And the bottom presentation is the new thyroid monitor by Kazuaki Yajima. And this new monitor is the portable spectrometric device using 4 GHz scintillation crystals. And signal transformation and reception and power supply can be possible via one USB cable. And this could be applicable to a wide range of age group, including infant. So especially the probe shape is suitable for the pediatric neck measurement. And this also the used for the application for detailed thyroid monitoring. So final category is the biological dosimetry, and the first one is the biophimetry project presented by Clarice Patrono. This project is the novel biological and physical method for triage in radiological and nuclear emergencies. And this time, they show the biological dosimetry of the 2-in-1 assay, which is dicentric assay plus micronuclei test. And also recent technology on the semi-automated scoring system. And we are waiting for the result of future inter-laboratory comparison exercises. And the final presentation is the e-learning application by Hyojin Yoon. And so the rapid examination after the large-scale radiation accident is required, and also well-trained scorers with high level of knowledge are required for the biological dosimetry. And this e-learning application has the 3 stages: education, practical training, and qualifying test. And this application is the promising approach to improve the speed of expansion of scorers for biological dosimetry. So here is the list of presentations highlighted here, but we have also a lot of presentations providing the useful information and novel techniques. So yeah, this area is quite diverse and wide range of area. So yeah, that's all from me. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Kotaro, for the very nice comprehensive view of the stats. Okay, now we would like to move to the first speaker. I would like to introduce Takako Tominaga from QST Japan, Department of Radiation Emergency Medicine. And she worked very hard at just after the Fukushima nuclear power plant accident in 2011. Actually, it was the first time for me to meet her. And since then, she has been involved in reconstructing the system for radiation emergency medicine and educating medical staff. Takako will speak about medical system for radiation emergency in Japan. Takako, please.
Thank you. I'm Takako Tominaga, QST, and I'm very happy to be here, and I'm really appreciate this opportunity. So today I will talk about the medical response system for radiation emergency in Japan, and so each country has its own system for radiation emergencies. So I think most of you are not familiar for the medical system today. So I hope this is something from my presentation will be helpful for you. So the first of all, before the Fukushima accident happened, Japan also had some medical response system for emergency, radiation emergency. So in 1999, we had a critical accident in Tokaimuro, and 2 workers were died because of the acute radiation syndrome. So after that accident, we revised some guideline for radiation emergency medicine, and also developed some new medical response system for radiation emergency, and also we make some many training course and educate the first responders and medical personnel in Japan. So at the situation in 2011, when the Fukushima nuclear power plant accident occurred, so there was a 19 prefecture which had some medical response system for radiation emergencies. So 19 prefectures. In these 19 prefectures, there the nuclear power plants are located. So only 19 of 47 prefectures in Japan, less of half prefectures in Japan, had medical response system. So the local government designated primary level and secondary level for radiation emergency hospital. So primary level hospital provide first aid and initial treatment for the exposed and contaminated patient. And the second level hospital provide some dose assessment and decontamination and medical treatment for exposed and contaminated patient. So local government designated 40 hospitals for second level and 56 hospitals for primary level in 2011. And also Japanese government designated the regional level hospital and national level hospital for radiation emergencies. So there's a 2 regional level hospital, NILS and Hiroshima University. And NILS was also designated as a national level hospital for radiation emergencies. So only one university and one institute were designated as a regional level in 2011. So the number of hospitals and medical staff were not enough for the huge nuclear disasters, because in Fukushima Prefecture there were 6 primary level hospitals for radiation emergencies, but the most 3 of them were at that time the medical staff had evacuated, so they could not receive any exposed and contaminated patient, and also other 3 were damaged by earthquake and tsunami, so the infrastructure was damaged, so they could not receive any contaminated and exposed patient in Fukushima. And so Fukushima Medical University Hospital was designated as a secondary level hospital for radiation emergency, but this hospital were located 60 kilometers from nuclear power plant, but also this hospital overwhelmed with the injured by earthquake, so they could not also receive any patient with contamination at the first station. So the medical response system was collapsed, and so the number of hospital and also number of the medical staff were not enough for these nuclear disasters. So we learned many things from this nuclear disaster and Fukushima nuclear power plant accident. So we need it need the strength and substance the radiation emergency medical system, and it needs the establishment of the nuclear disaster medical dispatch team. And we learned from this accident, so it needs the strength of the training system for medical staff. And also we need some preparation for training courses and guidelines for thyroid monitoring. So these are some example of the lesson learned from the accident. So now we renew the medical response system for radiation emergency. So Japanese government designated the Advanced Radiation Emergency Medical Support Center. So 5 university, Hirosaki University, Fukushima Medical University, and Fukui University, Hiroshima University, Nagasaki University, and QST were designated this advanced support center. And QST is also designated as a core advanced radiation emergency medical support center. And so the 4 of 6, the Nagasaki University, Hiroshima University, Fukushima University, Hirosaki University, these 4 university hospitals also designated as a nuclear emergency medical support center. So now we have a 6 core center for the radiation emergency medicine. And in local government designated the other hospitals, so the local area, there were local government designated the nuclear emergency core hospitals, and also they designated their nuclear emergency medical cooperative institution. So the nuclear emergency core hospitals provide the initial treatment and dose assessment and decontamination for exposed and contaminated patient. So they receive the patient at their hospital. So now there are 24 prefectures because the UPZ were expanded. So now 24 prefectures have these medical system for radiation emergencies. And also local governments designated a new cooperative institution for the support the activities about on the nuclear disaster, like such as examination for contamination, for evacuees, or some support for the distributing the stable iodines like that. So now these are the number of hospitals and also the cooperative institutions. And also now we have some renewed the educational system. So we make some systematic training courses for the medical staff. So we have 3 categories of training course. One is a basic course. So this is all the medical staff participate this training course. And this basic course has 8 lectures about the radiation, basics of radiation and radiation effects, or some lecture is about the stable iodines like that. And then step up to the next category. So next category is specialized course. So this course has 5 courses. Like one is a radiation emergency medicine, and one is a nuclear disaster medical dispatch team, and one is whole body counter, and one is thyroid measurement, and one is chromosome analysis. So these are 5 courses. So each person can choose the training course which they need. And the next one is next step is advanced course. So there is also 5 courses. So one is radiation emergency, and one is dose assessment, and one is bioassay, and one is a chromosome analysis, and one is a instructor training course. So these are 5 courses. So these every course they have it have a lecture and also the drill and exercise. It's related to the radiation emergency. So for the certificate shown the training course and graduates and the textbook. So we established the Radiation Emergency Medical Training Committee. So we certificate also the training materials. So every course use the same text, then same lecture, how to say, they use the same training materials. So it's certification for the training courses. So now, this new systematic training courses we started in 2021. So now the number of participants are increasing, but in these 2 years, we are just a little bit small number because of the situation of the COVID-19. So, but now the number of participants are increasing. So I think we are the system for the medical response system for the radiation emergency medicine is getting stronger and stronger, I hope. So this is the summary. We make some renew the medical system for radiation emergency, but it still needs some cooperation with DMART, Disaster Medical Assistant Team, and Japan Red Cross Society and others. It's required, but I think it's a little bit difficult because the differences in the competent ministry and the agencies. And also, it is necessary to maintain the skill in radiation emergency medicine, but the radiation accident or incidents and disaster is very rare event. And also, it is necessary to expand the education for first responders, medical personnel outside the 24 prefectures. We still have 23 prefectures, so we need all Japan some response system, but it's still in a way to the future. So thank you for attention.
Thank you very much, Takako, for showing the radiation emergency system here in Japan from the past and now. Okay, thank you. So if you have one short question, I can accept now. But okay, now? Oh, so you have? Please, shortly, yeah?
Hello. Yeah, thank you very much. Very nice presentation. My question is whether these training courses materials are available in English, if they are available online, if foreigners can do those trainings online.
Okay, so this training materials is only in Japanese. I'm so sorry about that because Japanese, only the participants and the audience is Japanese. And now we are developing some e-learning system for the basic courses. So maybe next year we can start the e-learning for basic courses. But it's only Japanese.
Thank you very much. A very important short question, Janet. Okay, so now we would like to move to the next speaker. Next speaker is Anna Nips. I don't have to introduce you.
No, thank you very much. So something slightly different. I'm going to talk about the ongoing and future work of ICRP on radiation emergencies and malicious events. The first part of my presentation is actually going to look at what already exists in terms of ICRP guidance and advice, and then I will give you an overview of what we're doing to address some of the gaps. So the first publication from ICRP on malicious events was actually prompted by the terrorist attacks in 2001, and it was in 2005 that it was produced. I'm not sure if Abel Gonzalez is in the audience, but he was the head of the task group that led to that publication. it was focused on radiological attacks, particularly RDDs, dirty bombs. The bad thing in a way is that for us now is that it was based on the 1990 recommendations from ICRP, that's ICRP 60. So it talks about practices and interventions, it talks about averted dose for urgent actions. It also refers to ICRP publication 82, which was published in 1999, again, based on the old recommendations. And that, again, talks about generic criteria for intervention and exclusion levels for commodities. So these are the sorts of terminologies you probably don't recognise in terms of what we use today. So although there are very many useful parts still in publication 96, it has a limited scope as far as we're concerned in terms of the scenarios that were considered, the non-radiological health impacts, which we heard a lot about yesterday, are not fully considered. Medical management has moved on and it's changed, and also so has planning and preparedness. And one of the main problems, I guess, is also that publication 96 doesn't talk about exposure situations or the dose criteria for optimization, or not too much about stakeholder engagement. So we have a much more recent publication, publication 146, which was published in 2020. It focuses on large nuclear accidents, and a lot of the learning there was from the accident at Fukushima. So it supersedes publications 109 and 111, which were brought out in 2009, based on learning from the Chernobyl accident. It is based on what are now not the new recommendations, but they are the current recommendations of ICRP. So we are more familiar with the exposure situations, dose criteria, and so on. However, publication 146 does leave a gap for radiation emergencies that aren't due to accidents at nuclear power plants, that aren't of a large scale, and that are of malevolent origin. So should a malicious event happen tomorrow, then actually there isn't any particular ICRP guidance that's current that we can refer to. As a consequence of that, the task group was set up to develop recommendations for radiation emergencies and malicious events, and these recommendations are to complement those given in publication 146. As if our scope wasn't big enough, with the conflict in Ukraine, then we were encouraged by ICRP to include nuclear detonation within our scope. So here's a list of the task group, very geographically dispersed, and also we have an excellent range of experience and competencies. And I have got two members of the task group sitting alongside me here who will give presentations quite soon. This year, well, not just this year, we've because of COVID and the difficulties with meeting face-to-face, we haven't met as often as we would like, but nevertheless, we've had 3 face-to-face meetings, 7 online meetings, 4 brown bag thematic meetings, and this year we've been fortunate enough to outreach. In fact, Janet and I were in Munich, and I gave a talk on TG120. Sheng Li's in the audience, as was Janet, at Remplan in Seoul, and Sheng gave a presentation, and then Janet very kindly gave a presentation on the task group in Dublin quite recently at the European Radiation Protection Week. So this slide gives an idea of the scope that we have, and as I was part of the task group that helped produce publication 146, and I'm thinking we probably had 30 task group meetings, and I'm thinking, well, that probably went on for about 6 years. Then I wouldn't like to say, if you use that as an example, how long it might take us to produce our report. But I'm really hopeful that it won't take more than 6 years. I'm hopeful we'll do it much sooner. So I've shown you the range of scenarios that we're looking at. In order to help inform our advice, we've actually come up with some case studies and hypothetical scenarios to fill in a template to record some of the key information that when we do our recommendation and advice, we want to make sure that our advice is applicable. So to be honest, filling in those templates did take quite a lot of time in the first year of our project, but it's very, very worthwhile because of the diversity of case studies that we found. So in terms of where we're at, we are busy drafting sections of the report. The general consideration section is mostly complete, but it hasn't been without its challenges. The scenarios, as I've mentioned, are numerous and they're wide-ranging in terms of their scale and impact. The timelines, obviously, you've got a threat phase, but then goes through to hours, up to years, and the early response phase, late response phase, which coincide with an emergency exposure situation, and then recovery. I have to say that the emphasis of our report will be on the emergency, simply because publication 146 did an excellent job on that recovery phase. So we will refer to it. We will have a section on recovery, but it won't be the main thrust of the report. In terms of other highlights, then the radiation-induced health effects has been drafted based on the most recent and up-to-date advice, including work going on within task groups within ICRP. The non-radiological health impacts, again, that is ongoing. We have a lot of information from WHO, from the NEA expert group on non-radiological health impacts. There's learning from COVID, there's learning from other types of emergencies. So that piece of work is ongoing. The principles of protection. So publication 146 didn't really touch on deterministic effects, but clearly for some of our malicious scenarios, then avoidance of deterministic effects has to be a priority. So we will elaborate on that in our report. Justification of protection decisions, again, is applicable to all exposures. There's a task group working on justification, and in fact there's probably a parallel session at the moment on justification. So we must keep in touch. There's a lot of task groups that we need to liaise with to make sure that our guidance is as up to date as it can be. In terms of radiological criteria, we're thinking about absorbed dose for some of those emergency exposures, particularly for response personnel, and then looking at reference levels for everything else. Stakeholder engagement, we're hopeful that we've written that section and it represents state of the art on that without repeating too much what already exists. And then moving on, Vladimir Bukovsky is helping with Sheng Sheng to draft what is termed emergency dosimetry, but what we really mean is monitoring and radiological assessment for emergency management and medical follow-up, and again based on a lot of best practices from ICRU and NCRP. Other highlights, really, some of the challenges where we're looking at emergency protective actions, then this is going to be really difficult because depending on the scenario, then priorities might differ. So clearly for a nuclear detonation, then sheltering is clearly going to be much more important than evacuation. So hence the importance of the case studies, so that we have to check. Hopefully we can do a lot of generic guidance, but clearly where it doesn't fit, there will be caveats, there will be subsections to highlight where you might be recommended to do something different. Exciting, I think, is that we've now got two mentees. Maren's here, you've probably heard her speak this morning, who are experts in communication. So they're going to really help us with who, what, when, how, challenges to misinformation, disinformation, and best practice. But it's not going to repeat everything that's there. It's going to be customized to what we really need to know for our reports, and it will signpost out to other reports where advice is already available and current. We had pressure put on us by the main commission in September last year to include nuclear detonation in our terms of reference, and by October we had the first part of our guidance for public protection on the ICRP website. And that is for public protection in terms of protecting responders, and that has to be much more thought through, consulted upon, so that will be part of the ICRP TG 120 report. That's what the sort of front page of our advice for public protection in case for nuclear detonation looks like, and it gives guidance for the first 10 minutes, 24 hours, 48 hours, and some more background information on that. It's been translated into 15 languages, and even the video, which is done by another task group member, Brooke Budemeyer, that also is available in many languages. So at least we managed to get something out quite quickly in the public domain. The timeline of our work has slipped slightly when nuclear detonation was included in the scope. That put us back a little bit. So we're still at phase 1. We're preparing our materials. We will then go out to do workshops to see the comments that we get back. That will inform our drafts for both the SLO consultation, that's the scientific liaison organisations. That's the first step. We'll get comments back from that. We will then go out for public consultation, and if everything goes right, we hope to publish early in, well, at some point in 2026. So thank you for listening, and if there's any specific questions now, otherwise if it's more general discussion, we'll do it at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Oh, thank you for the very nice talk from the task group. So one short question, please.
Maybe my question has got relevance to the earlier speaker also, and also addressing you. I am looking back to the history of the SL1 accident. Unlike other nuclear accidents, in this case, the victims had the contamination because of the radioactivity fission products embedded into the body, the field of more than 5 gray per hour. Now, the situation when you are talking about radiological threat, radiological terrorism after the blast, the patients who are brought to the hospital, they themselves will not external contamination, the body contaminated local particles embedded into their body. So what is the question? What is the arrangement? What is the thought behind how you are going to take care of the medical community who has to remove these particles from their body before they are taken care of for medical treatment? Have you got enough arrangement for decontamination of large number of public if such a blast take place? Have you got Prussian blue, etc., stored in the medical facility? So I'm making the special relevance to the radiological threats. Because this is one aspect, there is a real challenge to the doctors and the exposure to the doctors. Thank you.
Okay, so it's a really good question. It's not a short question. I've got. Well, I was going to say, if we haven't answered your question by the end of the talks, then we'll come back to it. But Jeannette is going to talk about that next. So I'll just introduce Jeannette. Thank you for your question. Okay, so Dr. Jeannette Carr joined the WHO's Radiation Health Programme in July 2002. She is now a focal point for the organisation's work related to radiation emergency preparedness, response and recovery. Jeannette represents WHO on numerous international committees, and Jeannette also coordinates 2 global expert networks, REMPAN and BioDoseNet, where her work is related to capacity building, development of technical guidelines, strengthening preparedness through training and exercise, risk communication and advocacy, and international cooperation. Jeannette is a member of ICRP Committee 1 and also a very valuable member of Task Group 120 on radiation emergencies and malicious events. This afternoon, Jeannette will speak about the new WHO policy advice on national stockpiles for nuclear and radiological emergencies. Thank you, Jeannette.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. It is my great honor and pleasure to have this opportunity to advocate for the work of for the very important work WHO is doing in the field of preparedness of health sector response and capabilities for radiological nuclear emergencies. So the work started actually going back to 2007 when we developed the very first report focusing on the issue of national stockpiling. Since then, of course, there have been a lot of things happening. New drugs came to market and were approved in some countries. New experiences emerged from managing and use of stockpile in health emergencies, in different types of emergencies, and then new guidelines were developed. So back in 2021, a RAMPAN, which is our global expert network, working group was developed and was set up to revise the 2007 report, which was long overdue. We had 5 online meetings because, of course, it was times of COVID pandemic, and the draft was sent for peer review to external and internal partners in the beginning of 2022. Then there were a lot of reiterations back and forth and finalizing the draft by the end of 2022. And eventually in January of this year, we published the document. Oh, yeah, I keep pushing this button. Sorry about that. I shouldn't touch the mouse. God, sorry. Yeah, the keyboard only. So this is a list of the working group members, and one of the co-chairs, Dr. Chun Shanli, is here now in the room. So if I say something wrong, he can correct me. We had 2 experts from Japan, Dr. Atsushi Kumagai from QST, and of course, Professor Makoto Akashi, formerly with NIRS, and now he works in Tokyo University of Nursing. We had also a number of critical contributors from WHO and outside of WHO who also made very important contributions. And the financial support was provided by Swiss Federal Office of Public Health. So the structure of the document, there are 6 chapters. Of course, there is introduction with the background, and then we talk about health effects of radiation, and then we go into the national stockpiles topic itself. We explain how to start formulating the national stockpile. We go through the formulary and how to manage the stockpile. And of course, we cover also briefly the upcoming promising research agents. And there are a number of annexes where we brought together best practices examples from several countries. The document is available online. We held a webinar when we launched it. It is also linked from this page to the video on YouTube channel of RAMPAN. And recently, our colleagues from Nagasaki University kindly translated the document to Japanese also. So the introduction, of course, is basic. I'm not going to go through details, but it talks also about target audience for this document. These are public health administrators, policymakers, healthcare providers, and any other health professionals responsible for radiation emergencies preparedness and response. In the second chapter, we talk about the health effects of radiation, very basic things, but minimum what is necessary to know when we are talking about stockpiles. The important third chapter, it explains how to start creating a national stockpile. So first of all, we encourage member states to map the resources available, to consider the risk profile. For example, a small country in the Pacific Island will not be expected to be prepared for a nuclear power plant emergency scenario. Obviously, it doesn't make sense. So it should be kept in mind what are the realistic risks for the specific country, where the radioactive sources are used in the country, what are the resources available. So based on that, there will be a formulary created. So we looked at possibilities, what kind of scenarios, and we considered accidents which may happen during the use of radioactive sources in medical uses, in radiotherapy, in nuclear medicine. In research, we know that there are many sources used, and also in industry, and of course in energy production sector. So looking at all of the potential threats and estimating the risks for each emergency scenario, as well looking at vulnerabilities in the country, which would include, for example, poor road conditions, the challenges for transporting and quickly delivering things, the lack of trained personnel, lack of resources to procure medical supplies and devices. Similar to what Anne just mentioned, that the war in Ukraine and it brought new expectations and needs. So we, of course, included the nuclear detonation scenario, whether it is improvised nuclear device, whether it's a nuclear tactical weapon or a full nuclear weapon. And you can see that patients which will actually require specific pharmaceutical interventions, these are those which are so-called intensive care and critical care patients. And depending on the yield of the explosion, it could range between 20 to 100,000 patients who will need clinical interventions. So how do we size the strategic national stockpile? We will, of course, look at scenario-based modeling, depending on the type of scenario and specific radionuclides which may be involved. We also should consider the demographics, population size, age structure, the geographic and social and demographic distribution. Also look at capacities of healthcare delivery systems and infrastructure, such as transportation systems, communications, availability of internet, public buildings, shelters, whether country is using nuclear energy or not, and many other factors. Also, depending on the scenario, we can model anticipated number of casualties based on scenarios and how the injuries will be distributed, requiring emergent, urgent, and long-term therapy. And also, dosing schedule of specific drugs and duration of treatment has to be factored in for each specific radiation countermeasure. So in the formulary, we divided in two parts, first looking at the internal contamination and external exposure. For external contamination, there are two types of agents which were considered, blocking and decorporating agents. And different routes of exposure, of course, were considered, such as inhalation, ingestion, or contaminated wounds, or all of the above. And therapy options. Of course, blocking agent, it is ITB, iodine thyroid blocking administration, or we call it ITB, which is based on the WHO guidelines developed in 2017. So we are not going deeply in detail. It is a very well-known agent, which is became a standard commodity for any country where there is a nuclear power plants. This is one of the obligatory factors of the preparedness. Decorporating therapy, which focuses on increasing body excretion of the radionuclides and reduced radionuclides distribution and retention in the target tissues and organs. Also decreases chemical radiological toxicity of the radionuclide. You probably are aware that different radionuclides, when they are uptaken to the human body, they will be settling in different organs. Some of them may not settle anywhere, but just go through the intestine and kidney and be excreted. So, and they usually will behave as a non-radioactive analog of these chemicals. So as blocking agent, I already mentioned, is potassium iodide. As decorporating agents, we included Prussian blue for cesium, radioactive cesium incorporation. As chelating agents, we included DTPAs, both calcium and zinc DTPAs for decorporation of transuranium elements. As a side note, I want to mention that at the moment we are working on a new guideline of WHO for assessment and clinical management of transuranium radionuclides incorporation. The work is now ongoing, and its target completion is probably end of next year. Will be new WHO guideline published. Chelating agents included such as aluminum phosphate for ingestion of radioactive strontium and sodium hydrogen carbonate for internalization of radioactive uranium. For external exposure, of course, the main concern for the external exposure are those who were exposed to high doses, let's say above 2 gray. So these people will develop acute radiation syndrome. And among all the types of manifestation of ARS, such as hematopoietic, gastrointestinal, and cardiovascular neurological syndromes, combination of all of them at very high doses, we only considered hematopoietic and gastrointestinal for the purpose of the national stockpiling, because cardiovascular neurological syndromes develop in those who will not survive. So we are talking mostly as a treatment of choice. First of all, we target support of hematopoiesis or bone marrow damage. And the elements of choice today are cytokines, or so-called growth factors. Of course, there is no clinical trials available in humans regarding the treatment with these drugs for obvious reasons. We cannot experiment on exposed, non-exposed, and compare the results. So decision on inclusion of specific agents of cytokines in the stockpile formulary was based on consensus of the working group experts and the outcome of peer review of the literature, including evidence from large animal studies leading to approval in one country, the United States, case reports from individual patients, limited number of cases, and data from use of the agent for other than acute radiation syndrome purposes. For example, hematological leukemia patients sometimes are treated with the same drugs, so we can judge by the results of that treatment, judge the toxicity, for example. So 3 of the growth factors are listed in this little table, and you can see that most of the countries, they have not officially approved yet these drugs for the use for acute radiation syndrome, but they may be approved for the treatment of other conditions. So what we considered growth factors targeting myeloid cells, also so-called GCSF, or granulocytes and macrophages, GM-CSFs, which enhance proliferation of progenitors, facilitate myeloid maturation, protect against apoptosis, and enhance cell function. One growth factor mitigates thrombocytopenia, romiplastim. Another growth factor is available to mitigate radiation-induced anemia, which is not yet approved for this specific indication for acute radiation syndrome. And certain pharmaceutical products are used, as I mentioned, to treat other conditions, but are also effective in the management of acute radiation syndrome. So these are little tables which present in the standard way each of the mentioned drugs. We talk about drug name, whether it's included or not in the EML, which is Essential Medicines list of WHO, official list, and none of them are yet included, but in future we are hoping to include them in that list. And the list, the function of it is it facilitates approvals in member states of WHO through the FDA-like type of approvals in each country. So we also talk about indication, route of application, and dosing, and shelf life of each of the drugs. Other agents considered are, for example, for managing gastrointestinal injuries. Those are which are dealing with antiemetic factors. You know, like main symptoms are vomiting and diarrhea. So these 2 drugs, ondansetron and loperamide, will manage that type of conditions. And also should mention that no successful treatment was shown in patients with ARS on treatment with any of the single agents only. It's always a combined effort, including hospitalization, intensive care, with availability of laminar flow rooms, which is necessary for successful implementation of this stockpile. So not enough just to stockpile the drugs. You have to have all the other conditions which are needed to treat these people. And of course, there are also non-specific drugs which are also necessary, but we are not including them in our formulary for this document because these drugs, antibiotics, antifungals, antivirals, painkillers, and blood products, they are non-specific. They stockpiled by countries for whatever other health emergencies. I'm over time, but I'm just very quickly scan through the stockpile management. So we elaborate in the document. You can read it, of course, in more detail yourself. But we encourage countries to include the plan for managing national stockpiles in the national emergency plan. We should consider legal basis of stockpile management. As I mentioned, the drugs should be officially approved in the country. Decision-making protocols for releasing stockpiles should be made. What are the criteria? At which point, who will make a decision to release, and how it will be transported, and how it will be replenished after. So all these decisions should be kept in mind. There are also description of roles and responsibilities of relevant stakeholders. There should be concept of operations, for maintenance, for training of people, for emergency use of stockpiles. And we also discuss in the document different approaches of maintaining and replenishing stockpiles. There are different approaches available. We describe those: warehouse stored inventories, vendor managed inventories, and also so-called stock bubble user managed inventory, which is quite interesting. For example, for a drug which is very expensive and has a short shelf life, and it's used for hematological patients treatment outside of radiation emergencies. In the United States, for example, they have inventory of which hospital in which state has and how many of these doses available. So in case of huge emergency mass casualty, there is a possible mechanism or communication channels are put in place and transportation routes are defined. How quickly gather these elements from where they are available. Of course, very important to consider resources and costs, and calculate everything in advance and fundraise and make sure that resources are sustainable. I will not go through the research chapter. You will be able to look at the document yourself. There are a number of promising elements are included in that chapter. And that is my last slide. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Considering the amount of information you had to get through, you did really well. Thank you. Well, we won't take questions after Janet. We'll do it at the end. So it's my great pleasure to introduce our TG120 mentee. She's last on, but she's certainly not least. And I would like to introduce Maren Gruss, the Scientific Officer at the Federal Office for Radiation Protection, that's BFS, in Germany, where she works in the Department of Risk Communication and Knowledge Management. Maren is a sociologist, and her area of expertise is social science research, potentials and challenges of digital media for risk and crisis communication in radiation protection. So Maren is a mentee of TG120, and this afternoon she will give a presentation on communicating radiation emergencies on social media. Maren.
Thank you very much, Anne. Thanks for the kind words and for the introduction. As you just mentioned, I'm going to talk about communicating radiation emergencies on social media, and I briefly want to mention that this is a joint work between me and David Sippennaler, the other TG120 mentee who can't be here today. This is kind of our starting point on of our work for TG120, what we are going to, or what I'm going to present now. Before I'm going to focus on social media, I would like to answer two very basic but nevertheless very important questions about crisis communication in general. The first one is, why should we communicate during a crisis? Well, crisis communication is an essential part of emergency management, which aims to protect the mental and physical health of the affected population. And to do so, we need to inform the public about protective actions, which is not really easy, because in the first place, when a radiation emergency or emergency in general took place, we have a very confusing situation. So everybody would want to know who is in charge. There might be conflicting information. You don't know what's true, what's wrong. You might misjudge the risk of radiation. You could over or underestimate it. And you don't really know who to trust, which advice you should follow. At the same time, you have an increased need for information from the public. So everybody wants to know immediately what has happened. Am I affected? And if so, how seriously am I affected? Am I safe? And what can I do to be or to stay safe? So crisis communication needs to address those questions rapidly and appropriately. Next question I would like to answer first is how to communicate in such a situation. Well, generally speaking, crisis communication aims to inform the public about the situation, which is not easy, as I just mentioned, because it's kind of a confusing situation even for the responsible authorities. It also aims to take the public's concerns seriously, and it has to admit that there is uncertainty. At the same time, it has to avoid further panic. It aims to increase trust in authorities, also because it wants to encourage people to follow their advice, and it wants to empower people to protect themselves, to give them the information to be actually able to protect themselves. For this, crisis communication needs to be fast, it needs to be reliable, understandable, and consistent. And the best way to do so is if you have one message and many voices. That's a key principle of good crisis communication. Now, today, when it comes to online communication and social media, this can get quite difficult because online you have many voices and you might have even more messages. So it's kind of an even more confusing situation. But first of all, I would like to talk about the benefits of social media for crisis communication. Well, first of all, social media can help us, just for 1 second because this is kind of very close to me. Social media can help us to distribute necessary information quickly. As I just mentioned, it's key point of crisis communication to be fast. It can help us to reach even more people if we use social media additionally to our normal channels of crisis communication, not exclusively, but additionally. It can help us to get into dialogue with the public, to actually ask them what are their concerns, what do you feel, what information do you need, which is very important to build up trust. And to increase trust, it's also important to be visible online, to be there as a very trustworthy and responsible authority even before an incident happens. And last but not least, social media can be used for monitoring. And I really want to stress this point a little bit more because communication is definitely more about listening than about talking. And social media monitoring is a great way or a more abstract level of listening during such emergencies. On the other side, of course, we have a lot of challenges as well. As I already mentioned, we've got too many voices online, which can lead to confusing situations. So it's very difficult to get a consistent message along. We might also have even more conflicting information online as a result of those too many voices. We might have misinformation that could be misleading or even dangerous. And we might have polarization and politicization when scientific facts get to be the object of a political debate, which we definitely don't want to happen during a crisis, or at least during the first hours and days. And social media communication is very resource intensive. You need a lot of people and a lot of time. It's nothing you can do overnight. When we look at the development of the social media landscape during the last 2 decades, you can see it was quite a busy time. At this point, it's important to note that this timeline is not exhaustive. There were far more social media launched during this time. It's just, I want to give you an impression. Also, there have been possibly more incidents, but those are the incidents we are going to, or David and I are going to analyze in the future. So you can see it was quite busy between 2003 and 2010. We have LinkedIn, which possibly a lot of you still use. We've got Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, now known as X, WhatsApp and Instagram, which are still very popular platforms. Later on, from 2013 on, we have more focus on social messaging services like Telegram and Signal, but of course also TikTok, which is famous for its short videos, and only recently this year, Blue Sky, which might or might not be a supplement for X. And here's important to note that social media is changing over time. So most of those platforms, except for example Instagram and TikTok, started to be very text-based, and later on pictures were the main focus. And now we have very short videos from 30 to 90 seconds. So every platform itself also changes over time. We also have the trend that many people, at the beginning, like at the very beginning, 2000 and when was Facebook launched, 2004, people tend to post everything online to the public. For example, what they had for lunch. Today, people mainly use social messaging social messaging services like WhatsApp or Telegram. So communication moves back more into private rooms. So that's also a very important trend. If you look at the incidents I selected, the Fukushima Daiichi accident was the first major radiological emergency where social media crisis communication actually played a role. Twitter was the platform of choice back then. I also I also put COVID-19 up there because I think it's a great example of a health crisis where we can learn quite a lot for radiation protection communication as well. I included a false alert in Ontario, Canada to show that you don't actually need an actual threat or a risk to have a communication crisis. And of course, the wildfires in the Chernobyl exclusion zone and the ongoing war in the Ukraine, which is a great example for the use of social messaging services like Telegram to inform the public about the current situation. And the lost radioactive capsule in Australia, what just happened at the beginning of this year, the responsible authority used mainly Facebook for communication with the public online. So you can see there are a lot of different situational circumstances social media crisis communication has to adjust to, as well as a change in online communication in general and different logics that are applied to different social media platforms. So social media crisis communication needs to change over time, it needs to adapt. And to give you an example of those different logic or the different functioning of three major social media platforms, I selected three examples. First one is a BFS series from the Federal Office for Radiation Protection, an Instagram post on emergency management and the three major protective actions in case of a radiation emergency. First, stay inside. Second, take iodine if necessary and advised. And third, evacuation. So this is an Instagram post. Instagram mainly works with pictures, and the picture has to talk for itself. Additional information might be linked below the pictures already next to the pictures. I also selected a YouTube video that Anne formally presented in her presentation as well about nuclear detonations. Can you survive nuclear fallout? Which is a great example for a good YouTube video because it's an animated video. Animated videos really work great on YouTube. It's short, it's about 5 minutes, it's easy to understand, it's very well edited. I forgot the last part, but it's a great video. You should watch it. And the last example is a tweet from the IAEA about the current situation at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Twitter is mainly text-based, as I mentioned before. So you have to be very short, but you have to be extremely informative. You have to use hashtags to place your information on the right spots. So these three, I think, are great examples to give you an overview that every platform has its own logic, and you have to adapt your online crisis communication accordingly. That's these examples and the examples I mentioned in the timeline before will be our starting point of our analysis for our work in TG 120. What we've done so far is that we already analyzed existing guidelines to identify important gaps. One major gap is social media communication. We held a TG 120 brown bag on communication and identified key topics we want to work on in the future. What we are planning to do is we are going to analyze the existing guidelines a little bit further, and especially we are going to analyze past events where social media communication already played a crucial role. We are going to write a chapter on recommendations for crisis communication as part of our TG 120 report, and we are going to develop social media messaging templates for different scenarios and different platforms. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer your questions later.
Thank you very much, Maren. Very clear and very well communicated. Firstly, has anyone got a question for Maren on her presentation? And then if you haven't specific question, then we'll open it up for general discussion. So firstly, anything specific for Maren?
Thanks, Adrian.
I have.
Okay.
I vaguely remember a talk you gave that mentioned how you might use AI
Yes.
for communication. Would you like to elaborate a little bit about how it can be used to an advantage, but how also it might be a disadvantage?
Well, at the BFS, we are currently working on a project to develop a chatbot for emergency communication. So we want to use conversational AI to support our public relations department in case of an emergency, which can help to cover the increased or to meet the increased need for information during an emergency. And that's not very easy challenge, to be honest. We have to consider quite a lot, especially about the ethical consideration to use AI in such a situation. But again, I think that the benefits outweigh the challenges by far, because in such a situation, we definitely need to inform as many people as possible 24/7. We don't have the resources to do it right now, and AI can definitely assist us in such a situation.
Yeah, I mean, can AI sort of pick up misinformation and disinformation? Is that the listening part?
Yeah, there are AI applications to identify fake news online, or misinformation, to be more accurate. But this wouldn't be part of a chatbot. These are different applications. For example, there is an application under development right now at a university in Germany, which spotters, for example, tweets that might contain misinformation by identifying certain indicators like emotional language or usage of specific emojicons or something like that.
Okay, thank you. Can we, would that gentleman like to ask your question again, or if Janet, if you can remember the question, would you like to answer it? So,
I think I will repeat the question. Compared to all the documents published by ICRP, IAEA, and various countries, what I find is the real challenge of handling a radiological emergency following a deadly bomb attack, radiological terrorism. That case, the victims will have high radiation field, not only contamination, because of the blast and the embedded radioactive particles. It can be hotspots. I gave the example of SL1 accident of 1961. The victims were having field of more than 5 gray per hour. So it can run into many gray per hour. Such victims are brought to the hospital. So how you are going to handle? For saving their life, the particles have to be taken out by the doctors. Then the doctors will get so much severe dose if they are going to do it. Second thing is, you have to decontaminate them before entering the hospital, such a large number. So when you are having the medical preparedness for handling radiological terrorism, it is totally different from a nuclear emergency or nuclear accident. Whether it is Fukushima or Chernobyl, that level of contamination you cannot think of. So this is one aspect I think it is missing. I request the experts here, ICRP, WHO, IAEA, all to consider this aspect. If any doubt is there, go back to SL1 accident history. You will understand the challenge. Please.
Thank you very much for your recommendation. I understand it's not a question, it is just a wish for us to address it. My counter question would be, have you seen TMT handbook publication, which is 560 pages, published 2009, specifically on triage, monitoring, and treatment of persons exposed to ionizing radiation as a result of malevolent acts, including radiological and nuclear. Very detailed manual, a textbook type of manual, how to decon, how to treat, etc. The more recent work is now jointly done by Eurodose Group and WHO REMPAN Working Group on contaminated wounds assessment, and to less degree probably it's less clinical, is more an exposure assessment. And then final point I want to make is that as if you are a medical doctor, you know that saving life is the priority, so it is always takes priority over decontamination. So we first will stabilize the patient and then we'll proceed with decontamination. So medical doctors will have to do what they're supposed to do, because we gave an Hippocrates oath to save the patients, right? And if certain precautions have to be done, they will have to be done. You can put a lead apron on, help the patient, but you have to stop them from bleeding. You have to stop them from going into anaphylactic shock or whatever. But decontamination is a secondary after saving life.
Okay, one there and then one there.
I'd like to ask people to present themselves when you
Yes.
ask a question.
Yeah. Yeah, please can you say who you are, where you're from?
My question is to Dr. Janet. Just wanted to know how will you train the medical staff in case of external radiation exposure situation? Because if you talk about the acute radiation syndrome may be happening at very high dose, but a little less dose also, because of anxiety also patient will show such symptoms. So how do you train the medical staff in such a situation? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. Acute radiation syndrome, actually, the main reason for acute radiation syndrome is external dose. And external dose, as you know, as soon as you remove patient away from the source, it's exposed person, but it's not contaminated person. Maybe externally contaminated, but you shower them, and they will not represent a danger for the healthcare providers to the personnel. So the only risk, what your colleague just mentioned, would be if there is a contaminated wound with shrapnel, with a piece of strontium or cesium, which can emit high level of gamma. But others, if you remember polonium accident, the patient was internally contaminated with polonium and with enormous high dose of polonium inside, but because it's alpha, the personnel who took care of him with the basic safety measures like a surgical mask and basic rubber gloves, alpha basically does not affect them. So we have to consider also these variations, the causes which result into acute radiation syndrome. So we consider that it's external exposure. It's already stabilized and non-decontaminated patient. So it will not be an issue. Also, there are modeling studies which show that medical personnel has actually very little risk of getting high doses. It will be a low level of exposure or no exposure at all.
Okay, there's another question.
The answer to my question, actually.
Oh, great. Okay. And who are you? Is there another one? Yes, there's another one there.
Well, thank you very much for your interesting talk. And I'm Isam Amir from Fukushima Medical University. And I'd like to ask Marin about the social media communication that I'm dealing with, tackling unfounded rumor related to Fukushima nuclear accident, and currently Alps treated water released from the Fukushima nuclear power plant. And there are a lot of unfounded, misinformation related to that. And just a quick question: that do you have any research related to, in order to avoid such kind of misinformation scattered in the social media, or do you have any research, or do you have any perspectives related to that? Thank you.
Well, I know about a few studies on how rumors spread on social media, which might be already very interesting for you to know, well, where they came from and maybe to actually tackle them at the root. There are also many different strategies to tackle misinformation. I'm not an expert on research on, well, how those different strategies actually work or how good they work, but I think that to get an essential, like a fundamental understanding of how rumors work online and how they get spread might already help you. I can forward this article to you if you like. I think actually that it is about Fukushima, the Fukushima accident, the article or the research project I'm thinking about right now, but I can send it to you.
Can I add to that? I just want to add to what Mari just said, that tackling misinformation, it could be also used generic approaches used for other types of emergencies. As you know, during COVID, there was a lot of misinformation and myth and all sorts of things saying that 5G is causing COVID, etc. So WHO has developed the whole concept, and it's actually singled out in the field of communication science as infodemics. So infodemic is the word. If you Google it, WHO and infodemic, you will find the website with practical tools, guidelines. There have been already the whole global conferences held on infodemics, so people share their experiences, so we can learn from that and apply some of the tools to the radiological nuclear emergencies. And the second point is that from my interaction with WHO communication experts, they tell us always to express empathy and never dismiss the fears and say, you have to validate, you have to say that, we feel that it is important issue, that safety is very important. So we have to always express that we understand where that comes from. And then, if we don't know for sure, we have to be honest and say that we will get back to you with the best answer. But so we should never just simply say this is not true, don't believe it, and try to neglect these concerns. That's it.
Okay. So I have one short question to Takako. Yeah, thank you. Maybe it's a little bit naive question, but you suffered. I know you suffered a lot just after this Fukushima Daiichi accident. Yeah? So what was the most difficult matter at the time you feel, and do you have any solution for this now?
So it's very difficult to answer your question. So the communication with the medical staff also, it was the big trouble for us, because the many medical staff did not what is the exposed radiation or external exposure, and what is the internal exposure, so or contamination. So it's very big problem with the communicate with the medical doctors. It's also there's some big trouble for us communicate with the medical staff and specialist for the radiation emergencies. So one is the some big trouble for that. So now we just try to educate the medical staff what is the external exposure, or what is the external contamination, and what is the difference between that. So, but I think many medical staff and also nurses said it's very difficult to understand external exposure and contamination and understand the differences. So that is basic, but it's difficult to difficult to understand for the situations. So I think. How to say, the lack of the chance for the education for radiation emergency medicine is one of the problem. And so because only the few chances for the medical staff for to participate in any training course for radiation emergency medicine. So so for the disaster medicine, there's many training courses and there are many chances to take some knowledge, to get some knowledge and how to learn about the techniques. But for the radiation emergency, it's very few chances. So I think that's one of the important to make many chances and opportunity for medical staff to learn and get some knowledge and learn about the techniques for the radiation emergency medicine.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's very helpful.
Yeah, certainly the work that you've done, with the medical systems here in Japan is phenomenal, and hopefully you'll never need to use it again, but then how difficult it must be to keep it maintained and ready to be used, even though hopefully it will never have to be. And hopefully the learning and the training and the education that you've done can be disseminated throughout the world, because what you've done is extremely valuable, and at the moment it's in Japanese, but perhaps you can find financial support or whatever to disseminate all that, because other places that are increasing their nuclear power capability and so on would benefit so much from everything that you've done. So time has come to stop this session. I hope you enjoyed the presentations. I thought they were excellent, and the questions were excellent, and the answers to the questions were excellent. So we promised to finish on time, which we have, but perhaps a round of applause for the speakers, please.